introduce you now to our panel. So firstly, I'm going to introduce Delphine, our new membership manager. Welcome, Delphine, and David Duffy, our founder and CEO, and they're going to take it over here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. So this is our final lunch and learn session of 2021. You're very welcome to join. And as the year comes to a close, it's a good time to look back and reflect on what we have learned from 2021. And today we will also examine the topics boards and their director need to focus on in 2022. So for that, I am joined by David Duffy, CEO and co-founder of the Corporate Governance Institute. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
And so the year 2021, we could say, was a year of unprecedented events with global repercussions. So it was also a year of major governance challenges as organizations scrambled to adapt to what we call the new reality.
Yeah. So let me just give you a few examples of things that I've seen out there. Two things come to mind. Are there trends? Yes. And I think there are probably two or three. One, which is the classic one, which is directors going on boards, not actually knowing what they're supposed to be doing, their duties and responsibilities. So here's a very good example. So Noelle Campbell, who's a well-known fashion model, she started a charity called Fashion for Relief. And her organization raised 1.7 million euro last year. And they spent 1.695 million on operations, and only 5,000 euro went to the charity itself. So that doesn't sound like a well-run organization. And then they paid one of the board members nearly 100,000 euro in fees. And of course, if you're on a charity board, you're not supposed to be paid at all. So the number of people went on that board actually not knowing what the responsibilities were. Not only that, their accounts are currently 200 days late from filing. So that's one good example.
Okay, so those are examples of why governance came into the spotlight, like with scandals this year.
Yeah, so the people on that board would be nervous about their reputations. So that's people not knowing their responsibilities, and they probably all went up on that board for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. The next one would be incompetent directors and boards. And I'll give an example here, and I'm not saying this board is incompetent or the directors are incompetent, but Westpac, a big Australian bank, has admitted it broke the law and agreed to pay penalties of over 100 million Australian dollars because of the treated customers badly, and they had a poor compliance culture, which should flow from the board. So that's a board that just isn't doing its job.
Okay, that's very interesting what you mentioned, but the culture, that the company culture actually comes from the board and that the board has a responsibility over it.
Yeah, so that's a big focus by central banks everywhere, but more and more having a culture that's appropriate and supports their future direction.
Okay, are there any other trends that you could see, within these scandals or in 2021?
We could talk about scandals until the end of the year or the end of next year. Probably best if we focus on, in 2021, ESG became, front and center. It's become a game changer, and it's now in the front of every board agenda. And that's been very much investor driven. So the investors are only going to start investing in organizations now who take ESG seriously. And I'll talk a bit about that in predictions as well.
Okay.
And
Would you first, please, David, remind us what ESG stand for?
So the E is the environment. So no organization should be damaging the environment. In fact, they should be making the environment a better place. Social is about people. So they don't want to do harm to people, and they want people to be happier, more satisfied in their jobs. And governance is governance, which is what we talk about a lot. And COP22 in Glasgow recently has helped to bring ESG up the boardroom agenda. And that's a place where many organizations need to think about going forward.
Okay. Would you say that ESG is becoming the modern agenda for boards?
I think it's more than modern. It's actually essential.
Okay.
You'd be surprised many directors don't even know what ESG stands for. Larger organizations will, smaller organizations may not.
Okay.
Nor do they understand the consequences of it.
So they would still need to focus on it.
Yes, they may put a board committee in place to work through what their ESG policy should be. But more importantly, it should be part of their strategy. How can the environment not be part of an organization's strategy? How can people not be part of it? And how can governance not be a part of it? Okay. So I'll talk a bit more about that on the prediction side later on.
Excellent. Okay, David, I think we saw some progress in the push for more inclusive boards. And we might say that the traditional look and feel of boardrooms seem to be like maybe fading away. So what do you think still needs to be done? And do you have examples of good achievement, good progress that were made?
I think progress is being made, but it's not being made fast enough.
Okay.
The Nordic countries, which would be Finland, Denmark and Sweden, put down board quotas about 10 or 15 years ago. So they are ahead of everybody else. Mm-hmm. Certainly in the UK now, there are quotas coming in for big boards. And indeed in Ireland here, quotas are now essential for state boards. We're now seeing examples of laws being passed. So in California, earlier on this year, there was a requirement that there should be better representation of the minorities or people of color or LGBT on boards, but that's got some pushback, and now that's gone to law. But that's an example of the governor there, Gavin Newsom, trying to do the right thing, but the pushback from various communities there. I mean, we live in a very fast-changing, multicultural, multi-denominational world, and boards need to reflect their stakeholders, their customers, their staff, their business partners and the like. And, I had a quick look at the Manchester United board today. If you look at who goes to football matches, women go to football matches too, not just men. Mm-hmm. But there's not one man on the Manchester United board. So
woman. There's no woman.
Woman, I beg your pardon. On the Man United board. So that's an organization that just isn't up with the times. And, mm-hmm. Manchester United has a women's football team, very successful, but there's no woman on their board, which I just found astounding. A very simple example of an organization that, to some extent, is stuck in the past.
Okay. To come back with you were talking about the law that was passed in California.
Yeah.
Would you say that the more minorities are represented on boards, the better for the organizations?
Yeah, I mean, McKinsey and others have done studies which basically says the greater the diversity on a board, the more perspectives you're going to get on particular issues, whether it's women, men, people of color, ability, disability. It's just sure they have the right perspectives around the boardroom table for their own particular organization. And diversity will mean different things to different organizations.
Okay, yeah, excellent. We might have a look at another point from 2021, another maybe trend or something that we saw, because we saw some significant strategic board appointments and changes at the top of some major organizations. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think good boards think strategically about how they recruit people. So if an organization is recruiting people on the board, the first place you look to is the strategy of the organization and where they want to bring the organization. And that will determine the skills and responsibilities around the boardroom table. So if I use the example of a Champions League football team, say PSG in Paris, if they want to score more goals, they'll look strategically for people who can score goals in the market. And these people may not be available for a year or 2 years, but they know they're available then when they come to the end of their contracts. Boards need to think like that. So a very good example of an Irish company, Stripe, they have appointed Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, to the board of directors, because they're thinking about an IPO. So they're thinking about reputationally. I mean, Mark Carney is just up there with the best in terms of integrity, ethics. And that says a lot about how this organization wants to go about doing an IPO, getting people of that caliber on the board. There are other examples of changes quite recently, which are to do with succession planning. And of course, any board needs to be thinking about the future all the time, whether it's succession planning for their chair, the non-execs, or the CEO. Is Jack Dorsey stepping down as the CEO of Twitter? That's a big move for him, because that's been his life so far. So stepping back for him must be really, really difficult. And clearly he's thought about that for an awful long time. And hopefully the board have too. So they might be getting a board that doesn't have the owner in the room, which can be very difficult for boards. But now he's not in the room anymore. So it'll be interesting to see where that organization goes. And lastly, closer to where you live, Delphine actually lives in Barcelona, everybody. Inditex, which owns Zara and various other brands.
Yes.
The founder there has just handed over the chairpersonship of the company to her daughter, Marta Ortega Perez. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, bringing somebody from the family onto that board. So those are kind of big moves by big companies. And we'll just be seeing as an institute what happens there and what we can learn, and then recycle within our various programs back to the delegates.
Yeah, I have another question for Inditex, David. Does it mean that actually the founder stepped away from the board, or he just introduced his daughter?
Well, the founder was female, so it's her daughter to the board. So the founder is, to my knowledge, is not on the board now.
Okay.
Yeah. The daughter was on the board, but now she's taken over as chair. Okay.
Excellent. So you mentioned something, David, about the course, right, a few seconds ago, and we can see that we could see last year that with over 300 students taking the diploma in corporate governance, the appetite for good governance is clearly there. So why would you say are people doing corporate governance courses? What would they gain for that? What are the benefits?
Yeah, well, firstly, we're quite amazed by the number of people who've done the diploma over the last year, and the fact they've come from 20 countries. Also, we run these webinars like today. We've done it pretty much every week for the last year and a half. And so far, over 5,000 people from over 75 countries have attended our webinars. So that says something about the interest in corporate governance.
Yes, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is just to make quality director education more accessible. You can do it on your laptop, on the way to work or at night or whatever. And the pandemic, of course, has made people rethink what they want to do in life. Maybe they want to work from home more. So what we've learned for the last year is that there is a big appetite for corporate governance, whether they want to do a diploma or not. They want to understand corporate governance that is easy to understand, that it's more engaging, it's more real, and it's in the moment. And for example, the Singapore Stock Exchange have just made it mandatory for anybody going on a listed board there that they do a qualification like ours. So in their case, the organization mandated in Singapore, which the Institute of Directors, which of course is a very good organization.
Okay, excellent. We have actually a comment from Hélène, just saying that she's actually taking the diploma at the moment, and she really enjoys the presenters and the contents. So good luck for your exam, Hélène. And David, if it's okay with you, we might go now to the prediction side, because we took this look back for 2021, but we are eager to what is in store for 2022. So you made 5 predictions that are based on the risk-facing organizations around the world, and you will share them with us. And we could say that they don't make for happy reading, could we?
Yeah, I think, there's upside risk and there's downside risk. So I think we need to be balanced in terms of risks. But you're right, you could be a pessimist and call it risks. So the first area which is clear to us all is political risk and geopolitical risk.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 6 months, 9 months has been China, the USA. Now it's Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and the USA, and the Middle East to some extent. So I think if you're on a board of, say, a multinational company, you need to be really aware of geopolitical risk. And you might need to get lots of input from the executive and outside experts. So do you have a context for making decisions? Because a lot of supply chains from different countries will rely on, stable economies where you can get goods from A to B, whether it's from Pakistan to the UK or oil from Russia to Europe, whatever it might be. It's really important that the board is getting reliable information, and if that information isn't necessarily coming from the internet, which could be fake, of course.
Yeah, of course. And so you mentioned that we could be pessimistic and see them as risks, but we could also maybe take them as opportunities, could we?
Yeah, so, you may want to go and do business in a country that is at risk from something else, and that could be your opportunity because your risk appetite is higher than other organizations, that they might be less tolerant of taking risks. So your board should define what their risk appetite is as part of their strategy. So, Ukraine's probably in a place you want to do business physically at the moment, but online is probably fine. So you want to define what your appetite is before you do business in the Ukraine. And by the way, I was asked to do a review of a private bank in the Ukraine about 3 or 4 weeks ago, but the scale of the job was just huge, and I declined it. But it was nice to be asked.
Yeah. So I can see that people start sharing in the chat, and we'd like to hear from you actually, because we are making predictions. So of course it's not a science, it's just, they are just predictions. So we would be very happy to hear from you what your predictions are for 2022, or what would you like to see as a big trend in 2022. So put them in the chat, share your thoughts and questions, and we'll take as many as we can. So David, what is the second item in your list for the big trends?
I think the next thing is trying to balance risk and compliance with every other item that should be in a boardroom agenda. So if you're looking at financial institutions at the moment, in most countries, financial services is heavily regulated. Based on my exposure to a lot of financial institutions, they are consumed with risk and compliance. And that can be to the detriment of other boardroom items such as strategy, such as talent management and operations. And indeed, I think there's a strong case for industry groups like Life Assurance in the UK or in France to talk to the regulators and try to get the regulators to be more reasonable as to what information is required to manage risk in an organization. I've seen boards with 1,000 pages going to the board, but 800 of those could be on risk. And that to me just doesn't make sense. I mean, who's going to read 800 pages on risk? But they have to, unfortunately, because they're paid for it. Mm-hmm. So I think balancing around the boardroom table, regulatory scrutiny is important. And the other thing coming down the boardroom is inflation. And we see inflation going up in the US, it's 6 or 7%, and the same in the UK. So that's a worry for many organizations. And that would probably end up in the boardroom table in terms of, pricing.
Okay, we have Terry Landers sharing with us that one of the trend is probably the pressure on institutions to transform digitally. And I think, David, that's one of the trends you also predicted about cybersecurity and digital transformation. Why are these a priority for a board?
Well, I think because of COVID, suddenly organizations have gone from having a physical presence in a market to a hybrid presence where it's both online and offline. And that's driving the need for business just to transform digitally. So Terry's dead right. And that means going through probably a strategy exercise for the organization to see how they can combine the delivery of services online or whatever facet of the business it might be. Could be customer service, could be anything. But they need to sit back as a board and figure out how can they digitize their business? Because if they don't do it in the market they're in, somebody else is going to do it. And the big challenge here is actually getting board directors who understand this, who've been in this journey. And they're probably not that many. And the other issue is they're more likely to be quite young. Certainly it's my observations that a lot of board directors of a certain age, and they won't understand digital transformation as perhaps as much as younger people. So, you know, COVID has impacted business models, both online and offline. And, you know, if organizations don't get this right, I think they could go out of business. So being able to transform the business digitally will be a massive requirement, necessity, but it could be to their strategic advantage as well. So.
Okay. Sorry, go on, David. I think I cut you off.
So being agile as an organization, but you need the right skills around the boardroom table. And digital is just one part of that. The other part of that is ensuring your systems are safe from cybersecurity. And we've seen so many examples of that in the HSE here and a transportation company on the East Coast of America earlier on this year, and indeed in the UK. So these guys are here to stay. And we probably don't know of all the cybersecurity threats where a company's paid, you know, €5,000 or $5,000. We only hear the big ones, and they just pay this money to go away. So these people are as likely to go after small companies as big ones, because the smaller companies, I think, are more likely just to pay the check.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very real risk that is to be taken very seriously.
Very seriously. And again, you know, I don't have any directors there who understand this, but the director's job is to ask the questions about our cybersecurity strategy, who's responsible, what data they get into the board about whatever the KPIs might be around it. And I don't know, I'm no expert in this area, but it's a really important area for any board. So if you're going on a board as a director, you know, cybersecurity, what are we doing about it? And then even digital. So digital should be part of any strategy going forward, whether it's part of the operations, customer service, you know, managing your workforce. It could be distributed around a country or whatever. This is here to stay. And of course, then you need to educate your workforce in terms of how this is good for the organization as well, because they don't get into bad habits. You want them to get into good habits about how they use the technology.
Sure, sure. And I'd like to make a link with the next point that you highlighted, that you wanted to highlight it, and it's again about ESG. And actually, Tony Mac Polan shared about diversity and inclusion agenda, and because the S in the ESG is all about social and human capital, how do you think that ESG will actually challenge boards next year?
I think it's going to be a big challenge. I think it's a game changer. Boards have been used to thinking within probably narrower confines, but having to consider the environment and the social side now, I think brings a much broader dimension to how boards operate. So they now need to be good corporate citizens in the world, as opposed to just being there to earn a profit for the shareholders. I think their mandate is much broader. And the Business Roundtable in the US certainly would be a supporter of that. So the E and the S broadens the board's responsibilities, and that'll also require new skills at board level. So ESG, it's a broad set of issues. It's, you know, carbon footprint, labor practices, supply chain, corruption, and the like. And, you know, if you're a big multinational, this will be tough to get around. And how do you know what's happening, you know, in something's manufactured in Japan that ends up in the US, or from China to the US or whatever. So there's going to be much greater scrutiny and probably regulation on this as well. So for example, if you're a consumer goods company, there's an opportunity here for you to offer products that are more sustainable products. And I bought a birthday card for a friend of mine yesterday. It was made from bamboo. So, you know, there's lots of things made from bamboo at the moment, but it's that type of thing. Or even I bought a jacket in a shop a couple of months ago, very, very high fashion jacket, but it said in the label it was made from plastic bottles. Now that should have been marketed. I would have bought 2 jackets had I known that. So these little things, I think, and how people market their products here is going to make a big change. So if you're a chocolate provider, you know, the ingredients should be fair trade ones and have sustainable options in their assortments. And research shows that, you know, people are prepared to pay a premium for that. So I see a brand new range of oral health products in my local supermarket, and the toothbrushes are outrageous prices. You know, they're €5 and €6 and €7, but because they are sustainable, I think that's good, and people would pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think sorry.
Could you bring us a bit deeper into how the boards are actually influencing those decisions in organizations, so that we can find the bamboo card in the store, or, you know, those new labels, or how is the board really influencing the day-to-day decisions?
Well, I think the board might need to be educated first as to what the possibilities are, from them to be, you know, have a much greater focus on the environment. They're not, you know, pumping lots of, you know, bad smoke or bad petrol or whatever. So they may need to get outside people to come in to educate the board about the broad remit of what they need to think about in the environment, or their social responsibilities, whether it's their workforce or their communities or people in their own supply chain. And then I think they need to think about, well, how do we respond to that? And, you know, boards should take small steps. They shouldn't try and conquer the ES and the G, you know, in a year. That just won't happen, because that's going to take research into where they should spend money and how they can spend money to competitive advantage if they're commercial organizations, like the bamboo example. I think the other thing to bear in mind is that, you know, customers and staff are much more conscious of wanting to work with companies that have a real purpose. And ESG is part of that. So they're not going to join organizations that are doing damage to the planet. So, you know, if you were looking to recruit somebody for a mining company, you might find it slightly harder than you would have 2 or 3 years ago, because people are much more conscious of the damage that mines can do to the environment. Mercer, the actuarial firm, brought out some great research earlier on this year that says that, you know, organizations that have clear, easy to understand ESG policies are much more liable to attract good quality staff, and particularly younger staff.
Mm-hmm.
Research also says that if they don't have these ESG policies in place, they will not retain those same people. So there's a big challenge here on every front.
Yeah. How I read an example just a few days ago about I think it's Adidas they are launching a new product, like a new running shoe, and it's a vegan running shoe, and they call it vegan, and so they were presenting it with the salad, you know, it's like very plant-based, we would say, and so people were like, but this is plain greenwashing, you know. So how can boards make sure to avoid greenwashing when they want to, you know, just go into ESG, but like in a real way?
That's a really good question, and I will attempt to answer it. I think boards need to develop their ESG policy, promote it, but unless it's authentic and unless consumers can trust them, you know, you won't get away with greenwashing. You know, you might initially, but you just won't in the long term, because, you know, there are ESG rating agencies out there in the market at the moment, a bit like Standard & Poor's or Moody's, and they will rate organizations and their ESG strategies. And investors will go to look at those ESG ratings, and they have to report in their annual report as to how they're doing against whatever they want to report. And this is an area that's still forming, ESG reporting. There are guidelines, but they're not as strong as like accounting policies, which are very strong, but ESG reporting needs to be much clearer. So I think boards that take a chance, organizations that take a chance, will just be seen through. by the customers and their staff.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about director skills, and particularly soft skills, because you were mentioning like risk. Those are kind of, you can be an expert in something, and it's very useful for the board that you bring your expertise, like in cybersecurity, for example. But what kind of soft skills could you bring to the board, and why are they such in demand?
So we deal a lot with search companies, both local and international, and their main focus for many of them, I'm not saying all of them, is on what I call the hard skills. Finance, legal, commercial, ESG, digital, cyber, but less so on the softer skills. And anybody who's been around a boardroom table and becomes toxic, it's not because somebody knows more about finance than law than somebody else. It's about the personalities in the room just aren't mixing. So I think there needs to be much greater focus on recruiting board members and having a very clear idea of what the current board is made up of in terms of their soft skills and the soft skills they want. So, good director brings skills like self-awareness, curiosity. That's good for everybody. Emotional intelligence, being able to read the room, and that's much harder when a lot of us are involved in calls like this, which are online. But if you're in a room with somebody, you can see how they are. You can see their eyes, you can see their body language, you can see how they interact before and after a meeting. They should have an ego, but it should be low. You want confident people in the boardroom. And you want them to have really good communication skills. What nobody likes is a director that just goes on forever and can't actually form what he wants to say, or she wants to say, in a few sentences, and saying, well, this is the issue, can we discuss it? I think the other soft skills that are in demand are being able to challenge other board members or the executive in a very constructive way. And that's an art itself. You don't want to be irritating people or being seen to be confrontational with people. You should seem to be constructive all the time in how you put your argument to people. And of course, a key skill of any director is say, well, I disagree with you on this, or I challenge you on this for the following reasons, but you should also be presenting options at the same time and not just disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing. Okay, so to have problem-solving mindset and the ability to ask questions, is that what you mean? Yeah, so that if you are going to engage in a conversation, you should be offering alternatives as what should we consider the following. So the decision might be to, expand into Spain, but there might be a better argument for expanding into France, for example. So you need to have your arguments and your research well done to do that. But that's the role of the non-executive directors in particular, is to ask questions like that. Why are we doing this? And of course, the part of director education, whether it's our diploma or some of our competitor qualifications, is to have the confidence to ask those questions in the boardroom. And as somebody said on the very first cohort, if you ask a very simple question and you get a long-winded answer to it, you probably have asked a really good question and you haven't got the right answer to it. Okay. Yeah. I think also directors must have the ability to be in the moment, like right now. So, and that means, during COVID, they need to understand we have a big problem. Our revenue has gone down by 50%. What does it feel like to be a staff member with the uncertainty, now working from home, not engaged with their colleagues, or a CEO operating an organization from their kitchen who's never done this before? The chair doesn't call the CEO on a regular basis. They have board meetings. He or she doesn't see their staff on a regular basis. And a good director will put him or herself in the position of that CEO. Think, what does that feel like? How's their mental health? If it's a woman of a certain age, does she have 3 children to look after at the same time? These sort of things. And good directors do that. They're in the moment. Okay, excellent. Thank you, David. And so we might say that I'd like to summarize saying that actually being a board member requires some courage. Would you agree with that? Yeah, because you're putting your reputation on the line every time you do, whether it's getting paid a fee or not getting paid a fee. It's your reputation. And, the last time I counted, you've only got one reputation. So you need to, look after that reputation.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. It was a very broad spectrum for 2022. And we have a few questions from our audience. So let's hear what you are saying. So I might read a few questions. Well, I saw that we had a few questions around agility and working from home. So maybe we could come again on that section because I think so. We had a remark from Martin O'Sullivan telling us that we should consider embedding hybrid working and its effect on organizational culture. Yeah. I think David, the Corporate Governance Institute actually talked about culture a few weeks ago. We might have a few webinars available online.
Yeah, Martin, that's a good question. I mean, everybody's struggling with this. What is the business model going forward? How much office space should you have? Who should come in? Why they should come in? And how are you going to manage people at a distance? So I think that needs to be very carefully thought through. And I think it needs a high degree of interaction with staff to see what works for them. And I think if you get it right, I think you're going to attract better people into the organization because it suits them. Somebody wants to work 3 days a week at home or whatever it might be. And certainly from a family life point of view, it can be really life enhancing for everybody. Because let's face it, not always need to be in an office all the time. So organizations need to think about that, both on the organization side, but also on the board side. Mm-hmm. So I think you need a mixture of in-person meetings and hybrid meetings. And I would say for big decisions, you should have in-person meetings in the board. So you get to meet everybody in the room and see what they think about particular issues.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, David. Actually, Lauren Phillips made a comment in this, the same about agility, flexibility, COVID word, And we had a question from Ismael Gonzalez. Yep. It's a very particular question, a very specific question about the path. So I'm going to read his comment. He is attending the one-week governance diploma course, and he has a strategic plan for transitioning as executive retailer into consultant and non-executive director. And so he's wondering how long and challenging can be the path to get the first role in board as non-executive director in London, being a non-British citizen.
Well, Ismail, that's a question that's asked by everybody. So, well, the first thing I think you need to do is, complete this diploma in corporate governance. So you have a piece of paper to say, I understand the world of corporate governance. I have a framework, and I can bring that to the boardroom table. And less than 0.5% of people in the UK and Ireland who sit on boards have a diploma in corporate governance. So you'll be one of the select few to have a qualification. The last module in the program covers you getting ready as an NED. Mm-hmm. And that's about you doing, I suppose, a SWOT analysis on yourself. What are your strengths, your weaknesses, and what's the opportunities and threats for you in your market? And then how you can differentiate yourself as a director in that market. But you need to make yourself very visible by going on webinars like this, by writing blogs, by writing white papers, and if you have time, write a book. Just get your name out there so you're seen as the expert in something. I think that'd be very helpful. I've known a guy in Dublin. He did the IOD course, which is a fine course as well, and then another diploma in the Smurfit Business School in Ireland. So he did 2 courses. I don't know why he did both, because they're not cheap. But he waited for the phone to ring. But the phone never rang because he wasn't visible in the market. And it took him, even though he's very well connected here, it took him a year to get his first board position. And he was well connected. So I think, Ismail, you need to think about, you are the product here. What do you bring to a board? What difference can you make? What boards should you be targeting? You shouldn't be targeting boards that perhaps it's in a sector you know nothing about, but you never know. But you need to figure out, what's your USP, your unique selling proposition. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I would say as well that once as you become a member, in the Corporate Governance Institute as well, you have access to networks, board offers. So then you have this network, these connections, and so this opportunity to maybe reach out directly, not waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah. So you need to be proactive. So we had one of our delegates who got through. 95% of people actually get through this qualification. But he ran a LinkedIn seminar for our members about how you construct your profile on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. If search companies are looking for an individual for a particular background, they will go to LinkedIn, and the key search words they will begin to focus on. So it's really important when you're putting your LinkedIn profile together, or on any other profile, that they pick out the words mm-hmm. that will help to promote you. It could be you're an expert in ESG as well, or cybersecurity, or digitization.
Prepare yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from John Hennessy asking if Brexit is still on corporate risk registers for 2022.
Absolutely. I mean, Brexit hasn't gone away. It's, it'll go on forever. So yeah, it'll very much depend on what sector the organization is in. But yes, no, it sure is there. It hasn't gone away.
Okay, excellent. Ismail, you're very welcome. We're looking forward to welcoming you in the course. And then we have a comment from Chris Gunn. I will read it to you because it's a bit long. So
I can see it here.
Oh, you can see it there. Okay.
Well, it's not surprising that insurers are pulling out of coal mines, so and they'll be pulling out of other things too, that do harm to the planet. So, who's going to be insuring petrol-driven cars in 2040? Probably very few. Mm. Who's going to be insuring what are now petrol stations in 2030? I mean, I know in Norway, for example, most petrol stations now are becoming solar panel charging stations for motor cars, and they plan to get rid of all petrol stations in Norway by 2030 or sooner. So there'll be a different insurance opportunity there, probably lower risk.
Okay, we have a question also from Sarah Colfer asking, do you think the new Irish Corporate Enforcement Authority, when it comes in, will encourage people to have a better standard of corporate governance?
Well, I hope so. I'm not familiar with the detail. What it needs is, real enforcement powers, so that people realize if they break the law, there's a consequence, but an immediate consequence, not waiting 5 or 6 years. I mean, we see in the US, people, if they've done something wrong, they go to jail or there's a consequence quite quickly. We need that here. And then I think people will pay more attention. They also need the resources. It's all very well bringing a new authority, but if it doesn't have the resources to deliver on its mandate, then it's more difficult. Whereas, the ODCE did not have the right resources or the right skills. And that's one of the reasons why the trial of Sean Fitzpatrick failed.
Okay, thank you, David. And we also have, I think, a comment from Tony Mac Polan a few minutes ago, asking about the central bank in Ireland dividing directors into independent non-executive directors and non-executive directors under their approval regime. Not sure I understand the question properly. David, do you see the comment from Tony?
That's in chat, is it?
It is in the chat, yes, and it was at 1:21 p.m. exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, they are dividing directors into independent non-executive directors and non-executive directors under their approval regime.
I'm not sure what the question is, I'm sorry.
Okay, Tony.
Can you rephrase it, Tony?
We'd be happy to ask to answer to your question, Tony. Okay, we will take a last question from Ellie Fairhead. As an NPO looking for sponsorship, how can anchor investors have a good ESG culture above and beyond policies in their actions?
Well, I think I'm assuming NPO means a non-profit organization. Well, I think you need to have an ESG policy that's implemented, and ESG needs to be part of your strategy. So it needs to be kind of part and parcel of how the organization works. And it's not just a bolt-on, it needs to be real. I also see a question here from my good friend Mariano Puig from Barcelona. Great to see you in such good shape. Thank you. I was in the gym this morning. Will the German new government support Europe as in the past? And is this a risk for European multinational boards? Good question. Mariano, if I knew the answer, I would tell you. I just don't know. I think so. I mean, there's been a great consistency in, I think, how Germany's conducted itself over the last 20 or 30 years. I'm just actually reading Angela Merkel's book. So I hope that the current chancellor follows through on what she says.
Okay, and yeah, we'll have a very last question from Andrew Leman. Do you think certain sectors will be disadvantaged in terms of lack of investment by an overzealous approach to ESG?
Good question. Possibly. But I think those sectors that might be at risk need to think about how they can be less at risk. So how can they mitigate their risk? So, you know, there might well be still a need to mine for real diamonds. You can get artificial diamonds, of course, but how can they ensure as part of mining for diamonds that they put the landscape back to its original form with the agreement of all the various stakeholders and typically the indigenous people as well.
Okay. David, is there any question you would like to answer? Otherwise, I think we'll call it to an end.
Well, Stephen Johnson says, will the CGI have a course on ESG in 2022? Yes, we'll have a diploma, and it'll be available from the 1st of May next year.
Yeah, we are working on it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, David. I think we covered many topics. So I think we could say that 2022 is also bringing a lot of surprises, and we'll be happy to share, to keep in touch with all of you and you know, share along the way with what 2022 brings us. So, David, do you want to say a final word?
Well, just thank you everybody who's tuned in this year, every Wednesday on most days. We really appreciate your support. And, you know, we can just be a better organization by people like yourselves asking us questions we don't know the answers to, that we have to find the answers to. But yes, you know, tune in next year and see what we have. So happy Christmas, everybody.
Yes, happy Christmas to all. Paul, I hand you the mic.
Thanks, Delphine. Thanks, David. Really interesting session. So again, just to wrap up, I'd like to reiterate what David said. Thanks to everyone who's attended this year, the regular attendees and any new attendees. We'll make this available for a week as usual, so you can watch a recording, and then it'll move into the paid members area. So everyone stay safe this Christmas, this holiday period, and we look forward to meeting everyone again the new year. And thanks again, Delphine and David, for an excellent session today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.